It's time to talk combat now. I've already gone into great depth about the basics of the combat in my critique of the demo. I recommend watching that video first. There is a link in the description. The challenge presented by the combat is finding which moves are effective on which enemies at which time. The battle system is designed so that if you make all the right decisions, you'll completely control and dominate the fight. Doing that requires switching between all of your party members to build up their ATB gauges and using a wide variety of moves in the correct order at the most opportune moments to pressure, stagger, and destroy the enemy while avoiding and mitigating damage. Thanks to the amount of skill required, a perfect boss battle will result in maximum satisfaction, while barely eked out victories are far less satisfying. That was a quick overview. For the long overview, go watch my critique of the demo. There are 5 specific issues regarding the combat that I would like to talk about here. 1, is the game too easy or too hard? 2, the differences between the difficulty settings. 3, should there be companion AI settings? 4, assess and retry. And 5, boss attack phases. First issue, is the game too easy or too hard? We're talking about normal mode here, and I can objectively state that it's not too hard, because within a few days of release, tons of people had beaten it, even the game journalists. All the YouTube reviewers were bragging that they finished the game before writing their review, as though that single playthrough makes their review well informed.
So it took me a while, but I finally beat the Final Fantasy VII Remake.
I have beaten the main story, I've done nearly every single side quest, I've tracked down nearly every single one of the 100% trophies.
Hey everyone, I just finished a full playthrough of the Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Now, is the game too easy? What would be an objective way to measure that? It comes down to the degree players must use the various in-game tools to win battles. In my critique of the demo, I observed that it is possible to beat the Scorpion Sentinel by just mashing the attack button and popping potions when you get low on hit points. I'm happy to announce that you cannot do that throughout the game. If you don't pressure, stagger, and use Aerith's magic and Tifa's unbridled strength, you will either die or turn a 5-minute boss into a 30-minute boss like I did with Hell House. I couldn't find the right timing to hit Hell House with magic before it put up God mode again. If you just rage on Rufus, he'll counterattack you into oblivion. If you don't use magic on a Mono Drive Mark II, you'll hardly deal any damage to it. You can have Barret deal lightning damage with his gun, but you'll still have to stop to run away from Airbuster's Tank Buster beam attack. You must use a large variety of abilities from all of your characters to succeed. Therefore, the game is not too easy. Second issue, the difference between the difficulty settings. We've been talking about the normal difficulty all this time. There are 3 other settings though: easy, classic, and hard. I've heard the argument that easy mode is way too easy and hard mode is way too hard. Well, guess what, bitches? The degree to which the difficulty changes between settings being not to your liking is just your opinion. It's not a flaw. Especially when you consider the in-game description of easy mode. It explicitly states that this is the mode for people who don't want to worry about battles. In other words, this is story mode. So yes, you can simply button mash your way to victory in easy mode, and that's okay. A possible follow-up argument is that playing easy mode won't train you for normal mode because it doesn't require to use all the same tactics. Well, guess what, bitches? Training the player for normal mode is not a requirement of a good easy mode. It's hard to say what would be a good easy mode for RPGs in general. Training you for normal mode by requiring the same tactics could be seen as a positive, but then your easy mode would likely be the same as normal mode, just with reduced enemy parameters. Then we're going to get people complaining that the easy and normal settings are too similar and simply reducing enemy damage is lazy difficulty design. Oh my god! If there were a mode called Grind Mode with the description intended for players who want to spend lots of time leveling up, are you going to complain that it's too grindy and it doesn't prepare you for any other difficulty mode? Of course not. If the setting works as advertised, it's not fundamentally flawed. Classic mode, on the other hand, is a shining example of a mode that is not what was advertised. Classic mode was marketed as the mode created to satisfy the people who want to play FF7 Remake as a turn-based RPG. Now, admittedly, it says in the in-game description exactly what it is, but that doesn't cancel out the marketing message because all the people who bought the game on day one, looking forward to playing the remake with turn-based combat akin to the original, didn't get to read that description until after they paid for it. We know that Square Enix's intention was to make Classic Mode a turn-based game, and it doesn't. Not correctly, anyway. The point of turn-based combat is to sit and think about what the right move is. If you make too many wrong moves, you die. So why does Classic Mode use the Easy Mode enemy parameters? That's the button mashing setting. The setting that explicitly states that you don't have to worry about battles. If you don't have to worry about battles, you have lost the point of a turn-based battle system. But even if the game was harder, you still can't sit and think about what the next move is because while you're doing so, your characters are automatically killing the enemies for you. So Classic Mode is a big fat flaw because it does not deliver on the promise of turn-based combat. It is literally just Easy Mode with auto battle. Now, what about hard mode? This mode is not simply normal mode, but harder. It's a different game. Not only have bosses had their attack and defense parameters set to the mid-300s, not only do they have way more HP now, not only do their stagger gauges increase much more slowly, but also you can never use items, not even outside of battle. And resting on benches no longer restores MP, only HP. This means you must execute more efficient strategies and avoid or mitigate more damage with a brand new MP management system layered onto it. It makes hard mode a very big jump in difficulty. Is it too big a jump? It doesn't matter. We don't get to choose that, bitches. I had originally considered it a flaw that hard mode isn't available to play right from the start. You have to unlock it by beating the game on normal mode first. In most games, that is a flaw. Star Ocean, Zone of the Enders, and Metal Gear Solid all come to mind. Why can't I choose the hardest difficulty right from the start? I'm sure the developer reason would be that they are worried a new player might choose it, have a bad experience, and then hate their game. Dude, all you have to do is write an accurate description of each difficulty setting. In the case of FF7 Remake, it's not a flaw because it's actually New Game Plus on hard mode. You keep your characters and equipment and everything exactly as they are and continue on completely intact. I feel like I was misled by hard mode. I thought the triple experience and double AP was so that over the course of playing through hard mode, I could max out my characters and materia. It turns out that a bit of grinding against the weakest enemies in Chapter 3 will max out your character level in no time. It will still take a long while to master certain materia, such as MP up, HP up, and magic up, however. So now I know that you're supposed to take on hard mode with max level characters because even if you don't grind, maximum level is only a couple boss fights away. You will find out very quickly that despite receiving double AP, hard mode is not the place you are meant to be sacrificing materia slots to random materia that you want to level up. It is the place you are meant to choose the correct strategy and execute it correctly. So even though this is not objectively a flaw, there is an objectively better way to do it, and that would be to simply master all materia automatically upon game completion, and have all materia found in hard mode be already mastered. In hard mode, you are not allowed to use any items whatsoever. The side effect of this is that exploration becomes far less meaningful. It already had massive problems to begin with, but we'll get into those later. You can still explore just for the joy of sightseeing, and you can still find materia lying on the ground. But nearly all of the treasure chests and items in crates are now utterly useless. Why did they regenerate all the treasure chests for hard mode if we can't use any of them? It just feels like a slap in the face. They should have either removed them, or, if that's too much work, just have any of the ones you looted in normal mode remain opened and empty. On the other hand, it is now extremely worthwhile to break Shinra crates in hopes of finding Mako shards to replenish 10% of your MP. That is your primary method of restoring MP in hard mode. It's too bad those stupid crates also still give you unusable items. It would have been so easy to just set the chances of receiving items from the crates to 0. Is anyone seriously glad that they can stockpile potions in hard mode so that they can use them when they go back to normal mode or something? Stupid! So the problem with hard mode is not that it's too hard. It's that it kills the value of exploration. The other problem with hard mode is that in order to get all of the manuscripts that allow you to max out your weapons, you have to do lots of side quests again after you already did them in normal mode. Admittedly, you don't have to do all of them, but until you figure out which ones have manuscripts and which do not, I guess you're doing all of them, aren't you? I'll just let you in on the secret. It's all the quests that have boss battles or mini boss battles. If by some miracle you haven't played hard mode by the time this video comes out, I hope I saved you from having to do the cat fetching side quest again. Third issue. Should there be party AI settings? Oh damn, this is a hard one. A lot of people are saying we should have some sort of adjustable AI settings. So should we? Here are all the possible reasons I can think of that people might want them. 1. Party members are getting themselves killed. 2. They aren't helping enough in battle. 3. They aren't building up ATB on their own. 4. They won't heal me when I'm low on HP. 5. They are moving away from where I want them to be. Let's take a look at each of these. Number 1. Party members are getting themselves killed. Are they? Here is me not doing anything during the Airbuster fight at low level. My other party members avoided the Tank Buster beam every time it was shot. The only time someone died was when Tifa got paralyzed by the hand lasers and then got hit by a big bomber, which dealt damage equal to more than half her max HP. That hand laser is an attack that shoots directly at the target. I recorded this fight doing nothing but standing around and guarding for the first few minutes in every phase of the battle. I was expecting that I would hit game over and then have to proceed by fighting the battle more naturally, but I ended up winning the battle. Here we are fighting Abzu with no materia or accessories on Tifa and Aerith, and lots of materia on Cloud to increase his defense parameter. This time we are obscenely over-leveled though. Cloud cast Regen and Monowall on himself a couple of times during this battle and avoided many attacks, but still died well before my mostly naked companions lost a significant amount of HP. In fact, they got Abzu to 50% HP while taking 0 damage. Eventually, Aerith died to a backwater blast, an attack that covers a large portion of the battle arena. Here we are fighting Phase 2 of Eligor at high level again. Eligor threw multiple waves of javelin bolts at us, and both Tifa and Aerith avoided all of them several times. Eventually, Aerith did get javelin comboed to death. AI-controlled party members throw out occasional attacks and spend a lot of time guarding. I don't see people running face first into enemies who are about to unleash a massive attack. Whenever the Scorpion Sentinel does the tail laser, Airbuster does the Tank Buster beam, or Crab Warden does the electrifying the floor attack, my party members avoid it on their own nearly every time. During your first playthrough, it will become obvious that enemies always target the character you are controlling. You can equip Crescent Moon Charms to further reduce damage to AI-controlled party members. You can also just cast your strongest healing spell, Magnified, and it will heal your entire party back to full life in most situations. So are AI characters getting themselves killed? They can, but you can prevent it. They take some hits, but it's almost entirely from attacks that home in on characters or have very large areas of effect, and there are multiple ways to prevent it from happening. We don't need AI settings for this. Number 2, AI party members aren't helping enough during the fight. In other words, they aren't adding to the total damage output of the party when not controlled by the player. This is true. AI-controlled characters never use any of their abilities or magic. They just cycle between attacking a little bit and blocking. But this is a good thing. If Aerith is dropping arcane wards and casting Firaga times 2 automatically, what is the player's job now? The more the AI does, the less the player does. We don't need AI settings that let the game play itself. But Zoltan, I hear you ask. You constantly rave about how great the FF12 Gambit system is. That system would destroy FF7 Remake's battle system, and the reason why will become clear at the end of this section. Number 3, party members aren't building up ATB on their own. Just like with the previous point, if they were doing their full attack combos and building up ATB, the game would become very easy. You would have an endless supply of powerful moves to use, and you can effectively pause the battle to use them. Since building up ATB requires attacking, this would also remove agency from the player to do it on their own. It would also greatly lessen the value of any of the various ATB building materia in the game. Party members not building up ATB is by design. You can tell this by the fact that even if you don't attack, you build up ATB faster than your allies. Number 4, they won't heal me when I'm low on HP. Yes, they will. If you give someone a mastered auto-cure materia, they will heal you up to 10 times per battle if they have the MP and ATB to do it. Of course, you'll have to build up the ATB with them yourself first. Once again, as with the previous 2 points, if allies were building up ATB on their own and constantly healing you, it would be extremely easy and rob agency from the player. Number 5, they are moving away from where I want them to be. This one actually makes sense. If you've got Cloud on standby with 2 full ATB gauges and you're controlling Barret when you stagger the enemy, you're going to want to have Cloud do Infinity's End to end that son of a bitch. But if he's backed off, you'll have to waste a second or 2 getting into range. And then you can't do Infinity's End anymore because the startup animation is longer than the boss's remaining stagger time. That scenario was a theoretical one that has never happened to me, but here's one that has. Many times in my battle against the Hell House on hard mode, I'd have Aerith drop an arcane ward and then switch to Cloud to draw its attacks. When the Hell House drops its shield, I wanted to switch to Aerith and double cast magic on his ass. But she was always nowhere near the goddamn ward and I'd miss my window before he puts up his barrier again. So perhaps this is the best argument you can make for AI settings. But I still haven't directly stated the most compelling argument against them. Are you ready? The game wasn't designed for you to control one character and have 2 supporting characters. It was designed for you to control the entire party.
Expire under the way. All standards I created betray.
That's why the characters guard a lot. That's why they rarely finish their full attack combos. That's why they don't deal much damage on their own. That's why you can build up ATB faster than they can, even when doing nothing. And that's why the enemies always go out of their way to target the character you are controlling. What else could all of these things mean? These videos you are watching right now show what is capable when one becomes an elite player of this game. Switching to a character, building up ATB, issuing commands, and moving on to the next character to do what you gotta do while the previous character performs the actions you've just told them to do. This is what the developers expect of the player, and AI controls would work against this style of gameplay. So we don't need AI settings, not even a gambit system. Fourth issue, assess and retry. Assess is the ability you use to find out the enemy's weaknesses. It doesn't tell you everything, but if you didn't have it, you would have to systematically try all of your abilities and spells until you found the effective ones on every enemy. So thank God for the inclusion of the assess materia. But what are you gonna do when you've assessed the enemy and see that you don't currently have equipped the materia that will let you exploit the enemy's weakness? There may be alternative strategies you can use, but you'll have to resort to pure experimentation in that case. If you want to use what the assessment recommends, you have to pause and choose the option to retry the battle from the beginning, and use the menu to re-equip yourself before re-entering the fight. For every boss I assessed and retried, the only alternative I see to this is trying what you've got and hoping you get lucky and something works. Since you can immediately retry a battle at any time, I see this as a small, annoying flaw that could be fixed by simply allowing us to change equipment during battle. The co-author of this channel, Mel, said that it would be cool if they made it so that changing equipment also required an ATB gauge, and I think I agree. Now, I used the word simply just now, but it's possible that adding in the ability to change equipment mid-battle would create a whole host of exploits and glitches that they didn't feel like dealing with. Maybe that's why we can retry, but we can't change equipment. Still, it is a flaw, which I said was a small one, but when we talked about it on the Turn-Based Memories podcast, Mel was like, it feels terrible. So the level of annoyance is going to vary from person to person. The same goes with this last flaw, which is by far the worst flaw of the battle system. And this one really gets my goat. Fifth and final issue, multi-phase boss battles. Multi-phase boss battles are not objectively flaws in themselves. They can be implemented to a game's benefit by creating huge challenges. They can be used to make battles longer and more epic. But they come with consequences as well. For starters, they turn one boss into multiple challenges that the player must learn separately and overcome consecutively. The more phases, the more difficult the battle, obviously. But the difficulty is not directly proportional to the number of phases. In other words, a 3-phase boss is not 3 times as difficult as a single-phase boss. It's more than that. If a boss has 1 phase, the player has 1 set of things to learn, and therefore 1 strategy to execute. If you fail, you can immediately retry again. So let's call that difficulty level 2. 1 point for having to learn the enemy's pattern, and 1 point for having a strategy to successfully pull off. How about a 2-phase boss? Now we've got 2 patterns to learn, 2 strategies to successfully execute. Phase 1 is now preventing us from immediately retrying Phase 2, and until we can get through Phase 1 flawlessly, the amount of mistakes we can make while attempting Phase 2 will be less because of our reduced HP, which means that we'll have less time to practice Phase 2 per attempt. Add all those together, and we're at difficulty level 6. crazy jump in difficulty, right? How about a 3-phase boss? Now we've got 3 patterns to learn, 3 strategies to execute, 2 phases blocking us from retrying phase 3, and 2 phases to get through flawlessly if we want to enter the 3rd phase with full HP for a total of difficulty level 10. So a 3-phase boss is 5 times as difficult as a single-phase boss. This method of calculating difficulty for multi-phase bosses is something I totally just made up. There are lots of other things I could have considered, but didn't. For example, if you can heal the whole party, you won't have to worry about performing flawlessly in the first 2 phases. Also, this game is not that reliant on precise timing or movement, and you can pause the battle at any time to remember what you were going to do next. But the point stands that adding another phase to a boss doesn't just make it a little bit harder, especially when you consider that each phase is usually more difficult than the previous one. Like I said earlier, I don't think we can say that multi-phase bosses are in themselves objectively flawed, but here are the problems with these battles in FF7 Remake. Every time a boss switches phases, there's a cutscene. It interrupts the battle and robs the player of control for a short while. Just let all that stuff happen while I'm running around. The more stuff happens while I'm playing the game, the more immersive the game is. The interruptions are bad enough, but even worse is that every time the phase shift cutscene happens, the stagger gauge gets reset. I think this was an intentional aspect of the design. The devs wanted us to build up the gauge the correct way to stagger the enemy and end the phase while they're down. It's not necessarily a flaw to design fights like this if the player can see where the gauge will reset. The way it is now, new players go into battle, get the boss's stagger gauge to 90%, then they deal a hit that sends the boss's HP past the invisible line. The cutscene plays, and the player has to build up the stagger gauge all over again from 0. There is no way to know when a boss is going to switch phases on your first playthrough, so you're gonna be in for a lot of rude surprises. I'm sure the reason this happens is so that you can't prepare a stagger for a particularly hard phase and instantly blow past it. In some battles, it's actually possible to do so much damage to a staggered enemy that it blows through the current phase and the next. But that is kept from happening because those invisible lines that dictate when to change phases are not just lines. They are gates. HP gates. What does that mean? It means that you can't continue depleting the boss's HP until you've opened the gate. And the gate doesn't open until after the cutscene. So if the boss is going to phase shift after taking 1,000 more damage, and you hit it with a 7,000 damage attack, the boss will take 1,000 damage, the phase shift cutscene will play, and when the next phase begins, the remaining 6,000 damage will not be applied to the boss. It will instead be applied to nothing! In other words, you just wasted 6,000 damage, brah. So on the list of problems related to multi-phase bosses, we have 1, they interrupt battles with cutscenes, 2, your stagger progress gets reset, and 3, you can waste high damage attacks. And numbers 2 and 3 are flaws because the player has no idea when these things are going to happen on a first playthrough. Problems 2 and 3 wouldn't normally be objectively bad. If someone wanted to design a battle system where the goal is to stagger the enemy before the next attack phase, and if you can't do it efficiently enough, you'll end up wasting attacks on an HP gate and resetting the stagger gauge, there's nothing wrong with that. But like I said before, they become problems here because the player has no idea when the phase shifts are going to happen. We don't know how much HP remains before the phase shift, which means we can't plan out if we should just slash a few more times or use an ATB gauge and a bunch of MP to cast Thundaga. So here is my super simple fix for all of these problems. The boss HP gauge. Instead of being the full HP of the boss, just make it the HP for the first phase and put a yellow dot on the right side of the gauge for each additional phase. Then the player can see exactly how long their window to stagger is. When the HP gauge is depleted, the phase shift occurs. Before, after, or instead of the cutscene, show the empty HP gauge break away and the first dot move and stretch out into a new full HP gauge to take its place. Instead of having the stagger gauge suddenly become empty, show it drain back to 0. And if you really want to be obvious, you could have it say stagger reset or something on screen. You don't have to change any mechanics. No QA testing required. Just make this change to the enemy's HP and stagger displays, and boom! All your troubles are gone. I am a genius. That covers all the big topics regarding combat. Here are some miscellaneous observations. Number 1, there are multiple ways to pressure each boss. It's really awesome. Most will be pressured after you deal a certain amount of damage, but there are also special cases. The Scorpion Sentinel will be pressured for a moment right after firing the tail laser. If you somehow manage to avoid Abzu's pounce, he'll just bounce onto the concrete and be pressured. If you can braver Rufus while he's reloading, he'll be instantly staggered. If you use arrow spells on the Valkyrie, it will get spun around in circles and be pressured. These are the kind of things that are left out of the assessment so players can find them on their own. Number 2, when you assess a Monodrive Mark II, it says that you need to hit it with magic before you can deal damage with physical attacks. It also says that it's weak to wind, but it moves so fast that you are very unlikely to hit it with Arrow or Aurora. If you have Arrow Ga, you can hit it with that much easier despite having a longer casting time because of the large area of effect. I always felt like this was not the intended strategy because it's such a massive MP sink for such a simple enemy. Then in hard mode, there was no way in hell I was going to use Arrow Ga, so I just tried a simple lightning bolt, and that worked far better. I'm not sure what to think about this one. On one hand, it's cool that players have to think beyond just doing what the assessment says. On the other hand, until you figure it out, this enemy's fast movement can be very annoying. Now that I finally figured it out, though, I'm on the side of it being a positive. Number 3, the ATB boost materia doubles your current amount of ATB. That means it requires successful attacks from the player to get the most out of it. That makes it require more skill to use than if it were just to give you free ATB. Not bad. Number 4, when both the Scorpion Sentinel and the Crab Warden use their EM field attack, would it not seem like the best way to avoid it is by rolling away from it? Well, if you do that, when Cloud stands back up, he'll still be hit by it, so you would have to dodge roll twice to get far enough away to avoid it. It's an electricity attack that forms around your feet, so of course they wouldn't be able to block it. Oh, actually, you're just supposed to block it. That is dumb. Number 5, this game has builds. It's not a character development thing, though. It's just equipment and materia choices. So loadout is probably a more accurate term, but I think of them as builds that can just be changed at any time. So I'm going to call them builds. Physical attack build, magic attack build, tank, critical hitter, healer, counter attacker, ATB galore build, and many more. This is excellent for replayability and customization of your characters. Another major win for the combat. Number 6, they got magic so right in this game. The whole point of magic is that you are limited by your magic points, but in return for having to consume a resource, it's stronger. Some games get this wrong by either making magic too slow, not powerful enough, or giving you so much MP that you never worry about running out. In Final Fantasy VII Remake, if you use 3 Firaga spells on Abzu, you will deal lots of damage and be all out of MP. Excellent. This incentivizes the use of Arcane Ward, so you can get twice the Firaga for the same MP cost. There's another win for the combat. The combat in this game deserves all the praise it gets. The way magic power and MP are balanced works really well. Every character has multiple roles they can play depending on equipment loadouts. The player controls all party members. It runs at a smooth frame rate. It's the highest fidelity portrayal of the Tetsuya Nomura art and animation style. And they somehow managed to put all of that into a battle system that requires strategy and skill to win. It's a thing of beauty.